The taste of copper flooded my mouth as I bit down on my inner cheek, staring at my mother across my apartment threshold. Behind her, Dad wore that expression, the one that said he'd just solved a problem I was too naive to understand. "We called the venue and canceled everything," Mom announced, adjusting her purse strap with the satisfaction of someone who'd just prevented a disaster. "That man isn't right for you, Cassandra. Deep down, you know it." My phone vibrated against my palm. The preview lit up. "Miss Thornton, someone claiming to be your mother just attempted to cancel your event at your own property. Should I contact security?" The apartment suddenly felt too small, too warm. My vision tunneled to that single sentence glowing on the screen while my mother continued talking. Something about saving me from myself, about non-refundable deposits and gratitude I'd feel later. The words reached me through what sounded like water. I held up one finger, a gesture I'd perfected in boardrooms, and watched my parents' mouths snap shut. "Rebecca, thank you for alerting me." I kept my voice level, professional. "No security necessary, but document everything. Also, increase wedding staffing by 20%. We'll have guests who might cause problems." The silence after I hung up had weight to it. What was that about? Mom's confusion was genuine. "Who's Rebecca?" "Rebecca manages Thornwood Estate." I set my phone on the entry table with deliberate care. "The venue you just tried to cancel, the property I've owned for 5 years. My name is Cassandra. I'm 33 and I own a $140 million real estate portfolio. This is the story of how I made my family finally see me." The color drained from both their faces in a way that would have been satisfying if my hands weren't shaking. Let me back up and explain how we got here. I'd been the family disappointment since childhood, not because I'd failed. Quite the opposite. The Thornton family measured success through a specific lens. Prestige over prosperity, appearances over achievements. My sister Helena married a senator's son. My brother Marcus joined Dad's law firm. They followed the approved path. Right schools, right connections, right marriages, arranged through country club introductions. I chose hospitality management and real estate development instead of law school. By 26, I'd flipped my first property using money I'd saved, working 3 jobs through college. By 30, I owned 4 boutique hotels. By 33, I'd acquired Thornwood Estate. 200 acres of historic property I'd transformed into the most sought-after wedding venue on the East Coast. My parents had no idea. Not because I'd hidden it deliberately. I'd simply stopped sharing my life with people who only criticized it. When I mentioned my first hotel acquisition, Mom asked when I'd get a real job. When I showed Dad the magazine feature about my second property, he changed the subject to Marcus's latest case. After a while, I stopped trying. They assumed I was struggling. Their narrative required it. The truth, that my struggling had built a $140 million portfolio while my siblings still paid off student loans, didn't fit. So they ignored any evidence that contradicted their story. It was 2 years ago at a charity gala when I met Jonathan Rivera. I was escaping a tedious conversation with a developer who couldn't take a hint. Jonathan stood by the bar in a borrowed tuxedo, representing a literacy nonprofit, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," I'd said. He'd laughed, loosening his tie. "Is it that obvious? I'm here to ask for money, but I'm terrible at networking. I keep wanting to actually talk to people." "What would you talk about?" "Right now? How surreal it is that people are drinking champagne that costs more than my monthly grocery budget while standing next to anatomically incorrect swan ice sculptures." He'd grinned. "I'm Jonathan. I teach history, which is why I notice these things." I'd laughed, really laughed, for the first time at one of these events in years. Jonathan was a high school teacher from Queens. He drove a 10-year-old Civic, lived in a modest apartment, coached debate team, and volunteered every weekend. He was also the kindest, funniest, most genuine person I'd ever met. When I told him I worked in real estate, he asked if I enjoyed it. Not how much money I made, just whether I was happy. I fell in love with him before our second date. Introducing Jonathan to my family was a mistake, born of misguided optimism. "And a teacher," Mom had repeated at lunch, as if I'd announced I was marrying a carnival worker. "From Queens." "He's brilliant, Mom. Master's degree, completely dedicated to his students." "But what does he bring to the table? What connections? What family?" "He brings kindness, integrity. He makes me laugh every single day. Cassandra, be practical. You're not getting younger. If you insist on marrying beneath your station, at least choose someone who can support you. I can support myself. Doing what? Flipping those little houses? She'd wave dismissively. Sweetie, that's a hobby, not a career. I'd ended lunch early. We didn't speak for 3 months. When Jonathan proposed at a tiny Italian restaurant with a ring he'd saved a year to afford, I said yes without hesitation. When I called my family 2 weeks after Jonathan proposed, Dad's response was immediate. You're making a mistake. This man has nothing to offer you. He offers me everything that matters. You're being naive when the romance fades and you're stuck with someone who can't provide. I don't need him to provide, Dad. I provide for myself, very successfully, actually. Right. His tone made clear how much he believed that. When this falls apart, don't come running to us. I wouldn't dream of it. Thornwood Estate was my masterpiece. I'd acquired it 5 years ago, a deteriorating historic property in foreclosure for a decade. The main house dated to 1890 with original woodwork, stained glass windows, and gardens once featured in architectural magazines. 3 years and $8 million later, it hosted 40 weddings annually at an average price of $150,000 each. The waiting list was 18 months long. Brides flew in from Europe and Asia just to get married in the Rose Garden. When Jonathan and I started planning, there was never any question about the venue. Are you sure? He'd asked. I don't want our wedding to feel like a work event. It's not just work, Jonathan. It's the thing I'm most proud of building. I want to share that with you. We planned everything ourselves. Late September date, 200 guests. Mostly friends, some business contacts, my siblings only because cutting them out seemed more trouble than it was worth. My parents received an invitation. I didn't expect them to attend. I certainly didn't expect them to try to cancel everything. Which brings us back to that moment in my apartment doorway, watching comprehension dawn on their faces. What do you mean, your own estate? Dad demanded. That venue cost $200,000. You couldn't possibly. I couldn't afford to rent it. That's why I bought it 5 years ago, along with the 4 hotels I own and the development company I run. I crossed my arms. Did you ever once ask about my actual career, or did you just assume I was failing because that's what you wanted to believe? Mom's face had gone from pale to red. This is ridiculous. You're lying. You're a house flipper. You've always been. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the saved articles. I was a house flipper, Mom. Then I became a developer, then a hotelier, then an investor. My portfolio is worth $140 million. I've been featured in Forbes, Hotel Management Magazine, and Architectural Digest. I handed Dad the phone. He grabbed it with shaking hands, scrolling with increasingly frantic movements. This can't be right, Marcus would have told us. Marcus doesn't know either, because I stopped sharing my successes with people who only wanted to see me fail. The silence stretched like pulled taffy. Why didn't you tell us? Mom's voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I tried. For years, I tried. Every time I mentioned an accomplishment, you changed the subject to Helena's charity board or Marcus's cases. Every time I talked about my work, you called it a hobby. I felt my jaw tighten. Eventually, I realized you didn't want to know. You'd already decided who I was, and nothing I did would change that. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, sharp and bitter. You just tried to cancel my wedding because you decided my fiancé wasn't good enough. You didn't ask about his character, his values, whether he makes me happy. You saw a teacher from Queens and concluded he was beneath me, just like you concluded I was beneath my siblings because I didn't follow your predetermined path. Dad set down the phone. His expression had shifted to something I couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe, or the beginning of shame. Cassandra, we were trying to protect you. From what? From happiness? From a man who loves me exactly as I am? From a life I built with my own hands? I walked to the door and opened it. Leave now, and consider carefully whether you want to attend a wedding you just tried to sabotage. Because if you show up and cause problems, security will escort you out. My security, at my property. They left without another word. Jonathan found me on the couch an hour later, mascara streaking my face. "Hey," he wrapped his arms around me. "Rebecca said something about your parents trying to cancel?" I told him everything. The attempted cancellation, the confrontation, years of dismissal exploding into the open. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm sorry they've treated you that way, that they can't see how incredible you are. They see what they want to see. Then they're missing out. Because the woman I'm marrying is brilliant and kind, and has built something amazing from nothing." He pulled back to look at me. "I'd be proud of you if you owned 50 properties or 0. You know that, right?" "I know," I leaned into him. "That's why I'm marrying you." "Should we uninvite them?" I considered it. Really considered it. "No, I want them there. Not because I need their approval, but because I want them to see everything I've accomplished, the man I've chosen, the life I've built." I felt something fierce settle in my chest. I want them to sit in my gardens and dance in my ballroom and understand exactly how wrong they were about me. Jonathan smiled. "That sounds healthy, and not at all like revenge. Maybe a little like revenge. I support revenge, especially when it comes with excellent catering." 3 weeks later, on a September evening when the gardens glowed gold in the sunset, the wedding day arrived. My parents came, subdued, uncertain, clearly unsure of their welcome. I'd had Rebecca seat them near the back with distant cousins and business acquaintances. They didn't protest. The ceremony was held in the rose garden. Jonathan cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. I cried when I saw him crying. Our friend Marcus, not my brother, another Marcus, thankfully, officiated with a speech about finding your person in unexpected places. "Love doesn't care about your plans," he said. "It shows up when it wants to, often disguised as someone your spreadsheet said was all wrong." Cassandra and Jonathan found each other at a party neither wanted to attend, bonded over ice sculpture anatomy, and built something real in a world obsessed with appearances. I caught my mother wiping her eyes during that part. I didn't know what to do with that information. The reception filled the restored ballroom, the same room where I'd once stood knee-deep in debris, imagining what it could become. Now it glowed with candlelight and laughter, packed with people who'd supported us, believed in us, chosen to celebrate with us. During toasts, my sister Helena stood up unexpectedly. "I know I'm not on the official list," she said, "but I hope Cassandra will let me say something." I nodded, wary but willing. Growing up, I thought I was the successful one, the one who did everything right. Helena's voice wavered. But looking around this room, at this incredible property, at the man my sister chose, I realized I had it backwards. When Mom and Dad told me about the confrontation last month, I started researching what Cassandra had really built. I was ashamed I'd never asked before. Cassandra didn't fail at following our family's path. She succeeded at creating her own, and I'm ashamed it took me this long to see it. She raised her glass. "To Cassandra and Jonathan, may your marriage be as strong as the woman who built this place from ruins." The room erupted in applause. I found myself crying again, but different tears this time. My parents approached during dancing. Dad spoke first, his voice halting. "Cassandra, what Helena said. She was right. We were wrong about everything." "Yes, you were." "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know we haven't earned that." He looked around the ballroom at the intricate restoration work, the period-appropriate fixtures, the seamless blend of history and modernity. "But I want you to know that I see it now. What you've built, who you've become. This is extraordinary." "Thank you." Dad turned to Jonathan, who had materialized at my side with champagne. "And Jonathan, I misjudged you. I saw your job title and your address and assumed I knew who you were. That was wrong. Any man who makes my daughter this happy is exactly who she should have married." Jonathan accepted the handshake. "Thank you, sir. I know this has been a difficult day for you. Less difficult than we deserve." Mom stepped forward, tears streaking her makeup. "Cassandra, I'm so sorry. For the venue thing, for the years of not seeing you. I was so focused on the life I thought you should want that I never asked what you actually wanted. No, you didn't. Can we? Can we try again? Start over? I looked at this woman who had dismissed me for 33 years, who had tried to sabotage my wedding 3 weeks ago, who was now asking for a fresh start she hadn't earned. We can try, I said carefully, but starting over doesn't mean forgetting. It means rebuilding slowly, with proof, not just promises. That's more than fair. And if you ever try to interfere in my life again, that's it. No more chances. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Jonathan squeezed my hand. I think the DJ's about to play our song. I let him lead me to the dance floor, leaving my parents standing at the ballroom's edge, watching their daughter spin through a room she built with her own hands in the arms of a man they'd called unworthy. The article in Wedding Magazine ran 3 months later. Thornwood estate owner weds in her own ballroom. The headline read, "The photos were gorgeous. Gardens in autumn colors, candlelit reception, Jonathan and me laughing in the rose garden." The journalist asked about the venue's history, and I told her the restoration story. What I didn't tell her was the family drama that had nearly overshadowed the day. Some stories are for magazines, some are just for me, but the ending was the same either way. I'd built something beautiful. I'd married someone wonderful, and I'd done it all without anyone's help, permission, or approval. Today, a year after the wedding, my parents are still trying, genuinely trying, to rebuild our relationship. We have monthly dinners. They ask about the business. They've even visited 2 of my hotels, walking through lobbies with expressions of wonder I'd never seen before. We had no idea, Mom keeps saying. We had absolutely no idea. I know, I always reply. That was the problem. The relationship isn't what it was before. It's something new we're building from scratch. There's still wariness on my part, still guilt on theirs. But we're committed to the process. Helena and I have grown closer too. She calls every week now asking about properties, about Jonathan, about my life she never knew existed. Even Marcus reached out after the wedding, apologizing for years of dismissive comments and asking if we could start fresh over coffee. It's not perfect. It may never be perfect, but it's honest now, and that's something. And every September, when another bride walks down the aisle in my rose garden, I remember my own wedding. The confrontation before, the celebration after, the moment when everything I'd built finally became visible to the people who'd refused to see it. I didn't need their validation, I never had. But there was something satisfying about receiving it anyway, on my terms, in my space, surrounded by evidence they couldn't dismiss or ignore. Some victories are quiet, some are very, very loud. Mine was both. They tried to cancel my wedding because they thought they knew better. They didn't know the venue was mine. They didn't know anything about my life because they'd never cared enough to ask. But now they know. Now they see. Not because I needed them to. I stopped needing that years ago. But because seeing is believing, and belief is the first step toward change. They're changing, slowly but steadily. And I'm building still. Properties, partnerships, a marriage, a future. All of it mine, all of it exactly what I chose.